Elitist Wesley LePatner, a star executive in Blackstone's real estate business, was among those killed in August by gunman Shane Tamura, who entered the company's Park Avenue offices. Mainstream media reports that Tamura was attempting to target the NFL headquarters, which is located on floor 5 of the building. This is an obvious and blatant lie. It was clear who Mr. Tamura was targeting on the 33rd floor, and it appears as if he hit at least one of his intended targets. LePatner attended the elite NYC private school Horace Mann and Yale University. She joined Goldman Sachs following her graduation, where she worked for over a decade. She joined Blackstone in 2014 when its core asset portfolio, which invests in commercial properties like warehouses, office buildings, rental housing, and hotels, was a nascent investment category. She assisted in launching the fraudulent BREIT in 2017, which has become a major piece of the private equity firm's push to attract funds from wealthy individuals. Business Insider profiled LePatner in 2022 as a power player in Blackstone's real estate team. What is Blackstone? Well, Blackstone Group is an American alternative asset management company based in New York City. It is the world's largest alternative asset manager with over $991 billion in assets under management. Private equity division of Blackstone invests in companies across various sectors. Blackstone is one of the largest real estate investors in the world. It owns and manages a portfolio of over 12,000 properties with a total value of over $600 billion. The real estate segment of Blackstone is one of the largest real estate investment managers globally. Blackstone offers a variety of hedge fund products, including traditional long-short equity funds, event-driven funds, and fixed income funds. Blackstone also invests in credit markets, including corporate debt, distressed debt, and structured credit. Blackstone was founded in 1985 by Stephen A. Schwartzman and Peter G. Peterson. The company has grown rapidly over the past few decades, and it is now one of the most influential financial institutions in the world. Blackstone's investments have had a significant impact on the global economy, and the company has been criticized for its role in some of the most controversial deals of recent years. Despite the controversy, Blackstone remains one of the most successful alternative asset managers in the world. The company's strong track record and deep resources have made it a go-to destination for investors. In August 2017, Ahmed Mansour, a human rights defender based in the United Arab Emirates, received a text message from an unknown phone number. The SMS promised new secrets about the torture of Emiratis in state prisons and included a hyperlink to an unfamiliar website. Mansour wisely didn't click the link. He took a screenshot of the message and sent it to an investigator at Citizen Lab, a digital rights group at the Monk School and at the University of Toronto, which had helped identify previous hack attacks on Mansour's phone. With this link and his help, they would eventually uncover the work of a mysterious 7-year-old Israeli company, NSO Group, that has built its business on the back of one product, a spyware suite known as Pegasus. Anything you can do on the phone, Pegasus can do on your phone, says John Scott Railton, a senior researcher at Citizen Lab, which released its initial findings on the spyware in August 2016. Turning on the camera and watching somebody in the room, turning on the microphone and listening to somebody. It can even do things that you can't, like put files on the phone and take files off to manipulate data on the phone. By reading messages and listening to calls either before or after they encrypted, Pegasus can foil encryption. By deleting itself, it can foil forensic researchers trying to understand it. Those who analyzed it called it the most sophisticated commercial spyware at the time. Pegasus probably hasn't been installed on your phone. NSO says it only sells to governments for legitimate reasons like spying on criminals and terrorists, and that it complies with Israel's export rules. The spyware is not cheap either. According to a price list seen in 2016, NSO charged customers $650,000 to hack 10 devices on top of a $500,000 installation fee. But the growing and loosely regulated market for Pegasus and other cyber weapons also represents a serious risk, say security experts, and upgrade to the age-old dilemma surrounding any legitimate arms sales. What happens to a weapon after it's been sold? What is concerning is that there is a gold rush right now to invest in companies doing offensive spyware stuff, said Scott Railton. It's happening without a lot of attention paid to the ethical and human rights risks. In June 2017, Citizen Lab and the New York Times reported that Mexican government officials had used Pegasus to spy on the mobile devices of journalists, human rights activists, lawyers, and others looking into murders, corruption, and the disappearance of dozens of college students. Pegasus had even been deployed against the phones of scientists and public health campaigners who supported measures to reduce childhood obesity, including Mexico's soda tax. Since 2011, the Times reported at least 3 Mexican government agencies paid NSO Group $80 million for the software. In a statement, NSO said it only sells to authorized government customers and denied having any knowledge of the attacks in Mexico. President Enrique Pena Nieto called for an inquiry, even as he insisted that surveillance software had only been used in cases involving national security and organized crime. Unfortunately, the investigations were slowed by what forensic experts say is an unnecessary demand that victims turn over their phones, and so far no one has been charged with any wrongdoing. Mexico and the UAE aren't the only countries where commercially made government-only cyber weapons have been aimed at activists and lawyers. And NSO isn't the only company making this kind of software. Citizen Lab has also helped investigations into abuse of spyware made by the Italian company Hacking Team and the Munich-based Gamma Group. This is an industry where the narrative of companies that sell government-exclusive spyware is, we sell this to support criminal investigations and track terrorists, says Scott Railton. But in practice, many governments lack the oversight that prevents them from using it in ways that are clearly abusive and have nothing to do with national security. NSO doesn't disclose its clients, but according to Citizen Lab, it has registered web domains, presumably for hacking purposes, in a number of countries with dubious civil rights records, including Uzbekistan, Bahrain, Kenya, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, Turkey, Qatar, Yemen, and Hungary. In 2013, NSO executives told the Financial Times that they had visited about 35 countries over the previous 18 months. Like many of Israel's cybersecurity startups, NSO was founded in 2010 by 3 veterans of the Israeli military signal interception group Unit 8200, Omri Levi, Shalev Julio, and Niv Karmi. Today, the company has over 200 employees at its headquarters in the coastal startup hub of Herzliya, according to its LinkedIn profile. A sales arm based in Bethesda, Maryland, Westbridge Technologies sells top-of-the-line technologies to various government agencies in North America, particularly in the U.S. Emails obtained by Motherboard show that at some point before January 2015, Westbridge met with U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration officials to pitch its software. There is no evidence, however, of what, if any, deals NSO has entered into with U.S. agencies. NSO did not respond to emailed questions from Fast Company, and Lavi, the company's co-founders and U.S. representative, did not reply to questions sent to him via Twitter. A person who answered the phone at the Bethesda office was curt, "We don't talk to journalists." NSO's government ties have also made a cameo in ongoing inquiries into the 2016 Trump campaign. Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, the former Trump campaign and White House advisor, served as an advisory board member to OSY Technologies, an NSO group offshoot based in Luxembourg, from May 2016 until January 2017. According to financial disclosure forms, Flynn received $40,280 for work completed while he was working for the Trump campaign. And just prior to his ill-fated stint as President Trump's national security advisor, Flynn also provided consulting work to Francisco Partners, the San Francisco private equity firm that owns NSO Group, for less than $100,000, Francisco's general counsel told the Times. A year after it bought NSO for around $120 million in 2014, Francisco began exploring a sale of the company. Earlier this year, it entered into discussions about selling 40% of NSO Group for $400 million to Blackstone Group, the New York-based private equity firm, a deal that would have valued the company at about $1 billion. The sale was scuttled in August after human rights groups including Citizen Lab protested. Then, in 2017, Lavi emerged at a cyber conference to announce he was launching a new startup, Orchestra, dedicated to cyber defense. "I think even from a business perspective, there is clearly risk in this space," says Scott Railton, "and we find it very troubling, and we think investors would be concerned too." In June 2017, after reports emerged that Blackstone Group was in negotiations with Francisco Partners to buy part of NSO Group for $400 million, Access now launched a petition to put pressure on the private equity firm to drop its plans. In its own letter, Citizen Lab told Blackstone that NSO was unable to prevent customers or others from misusing its spying tools, and drew the firm's attention to over 20 publicly documented cases of reckless misuse of its spyware. A month later, Reuters reported that Blackstone had pulled out of the deal. The investment firm didn't comment on the letter or the reasons for its decision not to invest in NSO, but when asked by a reporter for Israelis Haaretz in October 2017 if NSO would have still sold its technology to Mexico in retrospect, one unnamed executive affiliated with the company was emphatic. "No," they said. Predatory private equity firms buying up neighborhoods only to rent homes at a premium hints at the real meaning of the World Economic Forum's sharing economy. Americans never voted for this, but their leaders are loving it. Owning a home is no longer feasible for Americans coming of age in the 21st century, according to Bloomberg columnist Carl Smith, who smugly suggested in an op-ed that they stop worrying about whether they can afford a house, ignore the asset-stripping investment vultures, and just embrace the depressing reality of lifelong debt peonage under the rule of those same private equity giants. Lest there be any misunderstanding, the feudalist characters of this glorious new sharing economy is reflected in one increasingly popular solution for the generation currently facing the steep uphill climb to pay off their student loans. Under the scheme known as Student Loan Asset-Backed Securities, SLABs, students are invited to essentially indenture themselves to some corporation, paying off their debts by selling off a percentage of every paycheck they subsequently receive until the balance is zero. Any questions? With multi-trillion-dollar asset managers such as BlackRock, Blackstone Group, State Street, and Vanguard flaunting their bottomless pockets, ordinary mom-and-pop landlords looking to buy an extra property or two to open up a guaranteed income stream don't have a chance in such a rigged market, and neither do their tenants. Just as they did after the 2008 mortgage implosion, giant corporations are sprouting up everywhere, snatching for sale homes off the market sight unseen, paying a hefty premium to do so, then turning around and charging fee-laden premiums to the new tenant for what, in pre-new normal times, would have been considered the landlord's responsibility. But even with the dark truths of the so-called sharing or stakeholder economies on display for all to see, Smith sees absolutely nothing wrong with this model, indeed suggesting Americans should be grateful for the opportunity to submit to this shiny neo-feudalism. Smirking at the idea of a required revision of the American dream of home ownership, that is dispensing with the idea of dreaming of a better life altogether, Smith quipped that this country was always more about new frontiers than comfortable settlements anyway. Connor Sen, another Bloomberg columnist floating by on his own smugness, came to the similar conclusions, dismissing the fact that filling up an area with cheap, low-quality housing wrecks the market value of nearby homes by explaining that the landlord would somehow take care of that. But home ownership has long been considered one of the only ways, if not the only way, for young people to build up the equity required to start accumulating real wealth in the U.S. economy. Houses are unlikely to seriously or rapidly depreciate in value unless bought just before a speculative bubble bursts. But if the apartment you're renting is worth more over time, you don't see a penny of the increase. Indeed, your life might actually become more difficult as speculators start circling your rented home. Renting from disinterested private equity giants such as BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager, and Vanguard, its privately owned counterpart, is putting oneself at the mercy of a faceless slumlord with vanishingly little financial interest in fixing what's broken in any given apartment they own. Tenants have complained to the media about spurious rent hikes, evictions without notice, and delayed or never completed repairs. And the problem is by no means limited to the US or even North America, but according to Smith, this all pales in light of the magic of renting, driven by the company's own very special risk monitoring software, dubbed Aladdin, a supercomputer that will grant you 3 wishes, as long as none of them are "make me a homeowner." No cumbersome house to sell when you want to pull up the stakes and move to another state. No messy refugee camps. The very features that made houses an affordable and stable investment are coming to an end, he insists, embracing the change like someone who will never have to deal with its consequences. The practice of buying homes at jacked up prices only to turn around and rent them to people who can barely afford the cost of the home itself, let alone the heaps of spurious fees tacked on. It's not new, but it's been growing rapidly over the past decade, turning asset managers into some of the country's biggest landlords. Blackstone's subsidiary, Invitation Homes, was buying entire neighborhoods at a clip just a few years after the 2008 mortgage crisis sent homeownership into a death spiral. Helping that death spiral along, it treated its new tenants with all the warmth and benevolence of a hungry saber-toothed tiger. The company supposedly quit the real estate market in 2019, selling off Invitation Homes to cheers from those who'd be living under its thumb, but the tenants who'd rejoiced at getting its boots off their neck did so prematurely. The firm returned to the single-family rental market with a massive investment in a group called Tricon just a few months later, and other private equity companies then joined in the feeding frenzy, driving up property values in cities all over the country, to the frustration of those merely trying to find a nice place to settle down. Having nabbed the coveted post of running the U.S. Federal Reserve special investment vehicles under the CARES Act not once but thrice, BlackRock is rapidly outpacing its progenitor, Blackstone, in terms of sheer rapacious asset stripping. Massive asset managers such as Vanguard and State Street have so much money one might think they're literally running out of things to spend it on. But the firm's return to manipulating the market suggests more sinister machinations are at work. Far from running out of things to purchase, the private equity coteries are reducing entire industries into vertically integrated, dehumanizing life cycles. Groups like Blackstone and BlackRock are following in the filthy footsteps of the Sackler family, whose Purdue Pharma got hundreds of thousands of Americans addicted to opioids, only to turn around and patent a new delivery system for addiction treatment. Likewise, BlackRock and Blackstone have meticulously made money on both ends of the ongoing real estate deal, cashing in when a family leaves in disgust at their landlord's nickel and diming and minting of fees out of thin air. That said, when you have more money than God, there's always more to buy, and Blackstone said about acquiring a chain of self-storage facilities via its real estate unit, essentially betting that the long-delayed tidal wave of COVID-19 evictions would leave Americans with nowhere to go and preferring their stuff stashed in a shipping container rather than strewn across their lawn. The private equity firm had the chutzpah to praise the resilient nature of self-storage, apparently trying to paint the disenfranchisement of the American population as a net positive for the environment. Presumably, people will be living in these shipping containers alongside their stuff in the future, if they aren't already. Between the specter of 2008 repeating itself in the flood of near-worthless paper exiting the money printer over the past year, it's hard to imagine the U.S. pulling itself up out of this particular financial hole anytime soon, especially with events unfolding religiously in line with the path financial institutions took in 2008. The phenomenon of regulatory capture ensures history will repeat itself over and over again. So what does that mean for ordinary Americans? An attack of deja vu and a visit from the sheriff's department are almost guaranteed, and once again, no one will talk about it until it's too late. News outlets such as the Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic, and even Vox have struggled to deploy detachments of euphemisms in such a way that the population feels a little less doomed. That's a tall order when the Federal Reserve has poured more cash into the market in the past year than in the first century of its existence. The private equity vultures controlling stakes in the most influential media organizations explain why there are so many trite headlines downplaying the activities of beasts like BlackRock instead of calling it what it really is, a shadow Federal Reserve capable of foisting debts incurred through risky trading on the average citizen's savings, but never ever allowing the ordinary citizen to share in the spoils of victory. That leaves the average American languishing in pod apartments in overbuilt cities where, as the now ubiquitous World Economic Forum coming attraction rolls for the New World Order, their words, not mine, never tired of saying, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. What do you get from the private equity giant who literally has everything? These companies' takeover of the real estate market is an ominous harbinger of the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, in which the individual is gradually stripped of the few rights and assets they still have and lulled into passivity. We are staring down at the corpse of the American dream, tied like a trophy hunter's kill to the roof of our new electric vehicles, leased, never owned. Unaware of what we are looking at is our own future. Efforts to present this atrocity as either new or normal have been found wanting over the past year, and it seems all but impossible that the elements of the new normal will be achieved, but humans are adaptable creatures, and we can con ourselves into pretty much anything. As one of Wall Street's largest private equity firms, the Blackstone Group has made a series of moves, such as Blackstone's hire of David Urban, a Washington lobbyist with close ties to the Trump administration. Blackstone's courting of a Trump ally was not surprising, given that the firm's CEO, Steven Schwartzman, donated $3 million to Trump's re-election efforts and had previously chaired the president's now defunct Strategic and Policy Forum of business leaders and advisors. The close ties that have developed between Schwartzman and Trump following the latter's election in late 2016 have led mainstream media to describe Schwartzman as a confidant of the president. However, what was odd about Blackstone's hiring of David Urban was its murky reason for doing so, as the firm planned to task Urban with lobbying the Pentagon and State Department on issues related to military preparedness and training. This is odd, as CNBC noted, because Blackstone doesn't have any publicly listed government contracts, and its known investments don't appear to have direct links to the defense industry. However, Urban has extensive experience in dealing with both departments in addition to his close ties to the current administration and the fundraising apparatus of the Republican Party. While media reports on Blackstone's recent hire of Urban were unable to elucidate the motive behind Blackstone's sudden desire to court the Pentagon and State Department, they did note that Blackstone's previous hire of a Trump-connected fundraiser lobbyist, with Miller lobbying Congress specifically on a coronavirus relief legislation like the CARES Act. The CARES Act ultimately allowed private equity giants like Blackstone to access funds designated for coronavirus relief, likely thanks to the efforts of Miller and other lobbyists hired by Blackstone, as well as other private equity giants like the Carlyle Group. Though CNBC was left looking for answers as to Blackstone's sudden interest in aiding the Pentagon with military preparedness and wooing the State Department, the likely motive may be related to the other moves made by the company, such as the hire of former Amazon and Microsoft executive Christine Feng. Feng, who was hired by Blackstone on August 3, 2020, previously led data and analytics mergers and acquisitions at Amazon Web Services, which is a contractor to the U.S. intelligence community and other U.S. federal agencies. Previously, Feng was a senior member of Microsoft's corporate development team. Microsoft recently won lucrative contracts for informational technology services and cloud computing for the State Department and Pentagon, respectively. According to Blackstone executives, the decision to hire Feng was made due to her deep relationships in Silicon Valley and her experience working at Amazon and Microsoft. They also added that her hire was motivated by Blackstone's push to identify new opportunities to invest and partner with innovative companies reshaping the world, and Blackstone's recent effort to double down on tech sector investments. Notably, Feng's hire came just a few months after Blackstone had hired Vincent Lettieri, another tech-focused investor experienced with growth-stage tech companies, and amid a series of recent investments by Blackstone in tech firms, including Health Edge Software and Chinese data center provider 21 Vianet. It strongly appears that Blackstone's moves, including Urban's hire, are part of the firm's bid to become one of the top innovative companies reshaping the world, as the artificial intelligence arms race becomes a key driver in the reshaping of the global economy. Blackstone's Steven Schwartzman is a key part of the relatively tight-knit group of billionaires and influential political figures, like Henry Kissinger and Eric Schmidt, that are working to create a global compact on the research, introduction, and deployment of AI, and Schwartzman has heralded the coming age of AI as representing a fourth revolution for humanity. Schwartzman argued for greater global collaboration on AI-driven technologies, particularly between the US and China, in a July 2020 op-ed for Yahoo Finance, where he wrote that the establishment of common governance structures for the research, introduction, and deployment of AI is necessary if we are to avoid the negative consequences of AI, ultimately comparing the current pace of development of AI to that of past arms races, such as those involving nuclear and biological weapons. Per Schwartzman, these common governance structures would produce explicit global commitments, agreements, and eventually international laws with consequences for violation that relate directly to AI and its use. Blackstone's head is convinced that these common governance structures should be built between the US and China, hence his heavy investment in universities and artificial intelligence education in both countries. For instance, Schwartzman created the Schwartzman Scholars Program in 2016, where around 100 to 200 students from around the world pursue a master's degree in global affairs at Tsinghua University in Beijing annually. The official goal of the program, which was modeled after the Rhodes Scholar Program, is to create a growing network of global leaders that will build strong ties between China and the rest of the world. The program's advisors include former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, Condoleezza Rice, and Colin Powell, and former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair, as well as former World Bank President James Wolfensohn, and former US Secretary of the Treasury and Goldman Sachs executive Henry Paulson. Schwartzman has also donated hundreds of millions of dollars to create an AI-focused institute at Oxford University. Then, in the U.S., Schwartzman gave $350 million to MIT, prompting the school to create the Schwartzman College of Computing, which aims to specifically address the global opportunities and challenges presented by the ubiquity of computing across industries and academic disciplines, and by the rise of artificial intelligence. MIT News later noted that the impulse behind the founding of the college came from trips he had taken to China, where he observed intensified Chinese investment in artificial intelligence and wanted to make sure the U.S. was also on the leading edge of AI. The college's inauguration also featured Henry Kissinger as speaker, where Kissinger mulled the potential impacts of AI and stated that AI makes it technically possible easier to control your population. Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, credits Schwartzman's lead to invest in AI education in the U.S. In May of 2019, a federal commission that Schmidt chairs, called the National Security Commission on AI, NSCAI, produced a document that was obtained by a FOIA request earlier this year. One particularly important page made a point that was essentially repeated in Schwartzman's July op-ed regarding a global AI compact. Titled, The Importance of U.S.-China AI Cooperation. It begins with a quote from Kissinger, a key advisor and great friend of Schmidt, about the need for arms control negotiation for AI, and then states that the future of AI will be decided at the intersection of private enterprise and policy leaders between China and the U.S. In other words, the Schmidt-chaired NSCAI argues that the future of AI will be determined by the political leaders and business leaders of China and the U.S. The page also adds that we, the United States, risk being left out of the discussions where norms around AI are set for the rest of our lifetimes. Apple, Amazon, Alibaba, and Microsoft will not be. This is particularly significant given the NSCAI is tasked with making recommendations to the federal government regarding how to move forward with AI regulations within the context of national security, and its members include key members of the Pentagon, U.S. intelligence community, and Silicon Valley behemoths that double as contractors to the U.S. military, U.S. intelligence, or both. One of the NSCAI's interests, per the FOIA-obtained document, is the use of an AI in diplomacy, suggesting that it also seeks to explore potential State Department uses for AI. Notably, earlier this year, and a year after the aforementioned NSCAI document was written, the State Department saw key aspects of its IT infrastructure privatized and given over to the NSCAI-linked companies like Microsoft. Given Schwartzman's views on AI, his AI-focused philanthropy, and Blackstone's recent pivot towards technology, it becomes easier to understand why Blackstone hired David Urban to lobby the Department of Defense and the State Department. Over the last several years, Schwartzman ally Eric Schmidt has reinvented himself as the prime liaison between Silicon Valley. And the national security community through his chairing of the NSCAI and other positions, and has been lobbying to revamp America's defense forces with more engineers, more software, and more AI. Blackstone's plan to use David Urban to woo the Pentagon are likely directly related to these efforts to speed up and determine not just when, but how the U.S. military adopts AI-driven technologies, particularly regarding the degree of collaboration with China. Schwartzman, Schmidt, Kissinger, and their allies, as pointed out previously, appear to favor direct collaboration with China regarding AI, seeing it as better for business and the best way to avert catastrophe. This is particularly true for Schwartzman, who has close business ties to China and has been described as Trump's China whisperer by mainstream media. Indeed, Schwartzman and Blackstone have completed numerous multi-billion-dollar deals in China, with a Hong Kong-based publication even claiming that Schwartzman has become the go-to man for Chinese buyers. In addition, Schwartzman has a strong personal relationship with Chinese leader Xi Jinping and is accredited with softening Trump's rhetoric and stance on certain issues related to China since 2017. Part of the reason for this, per Henry Kissinger, owes to Schwartzman's unique standing in China. Despite his close ties to Schwartzman, Trump has sent mixed signals regarding how much of Schwartzman's advice regarding China he will take. Trump's tendency, in public anyway, has been to bolster the nationalist rhetoric of the cadre of neoconservatives and other figures who compose the Committee on the Present Danger China, CBDC, chief among them former Trump strategist Steve Bannon. Bannon and other CBDC figures have described Schwartzman as a rival, with Bannon specifically singling Schwartzman out, asserting that the Blackstone founder threatened to undo his efforts at guiding the president towards more nationalist policies popular with his base, such as fighting an economic war with China. Bannon's concerns are also echoed by some hardliners in the Trump administration and the Pentagon, who like Bannon view China as an existential threat to U.S. hegemony and therefore national security. Ultimately, with David Urban's hire, Schwartzman and Blackstone appear to be taking their efforts to shape AI's future by lobbying the Pentagon and State Department directly in the event that Trump's nationalistic tendencies threaten their vision of U.S.-China collaboration and AI in the post-coronavirus world. The $69 billion private Blackstone Real Estate Income Trust, BREIT, imposed withdrawal limits as Wall Street struggled to keep its usurious Ponzi scam afloat back in December 2022. AMTV's Christopher Green covered the story with warnings about how he believes the bank runs have already started and that the nightmare has only just begun. Bank runs have officially started in the United States of America, Green said. We're going to have bank runs, we're going to have capital controls, we're going to have restrictions on withdrawals, and this is only the beginning. Blackstone, which holds tons and tons of customer funds and debt, is now prohibiting the willful withdrawal of customer funds and monies in their accounts. How is this any different than SBF or FTX? BREIT sits under mountains of debt, Green added, noting that this is part of why it has run out of liquidity. Blackstone's COO told CNBC that investors should look at the fund as a long-term vehicle that's well-positioned for the future. In other words, do not panic and leave your money there. It is not as though investors can get their money out even if they wanted to. With those withdrawal limits in place, they are restricted from doing so, which also sent the company's stock price tumbling. They have zero liquidity because, again, the investments they are invested in cannot be sold and they're in mountains of debt, Green warned. In March 2021, the Blackstone Group made headlines for extracting hundreds of millions of dollars from a healthcare company accused of fraud and then cashing out further by taking it through an IPO. Blackstone is a repeat offender when it comes to owning healthcare companies that have paid out multi-million-dollar settlements for allegedly defrauding Medicare and other government health programs. The same Blackstone executive led acquisitions of multiple healthcare that later paid fraud settlements, suggesting significant failures of monitoring or due diligence. Blackstone's Apria Healthcare, which rents out at-home ventilators and other medical products, paid its owners a $210 million debt-funded dividend in December, the same month that the company agreed to $40.5 million to settle allegations of Medicare fraud. The Washington Post reported that the company submitted false medical claims for ventilator rentals worth millions of dollars to the government, even as it eliminated the jobs of respiratory specialists needed to ensure patients were properly using the machines. According to the Washington Post, the Blackstone spokesman claimed its executives were unaware of the conduct at Apria that led to the False Claims Act settlement. Apria is at least the third Blackstone-owned company to settle False Claims Act suits, two of which related to conduct that occurred under Blackstone's ownership. The acquisition of all three of those companies, Apria, Vanguard Health Systems, and Team Health Holdings, was led by Blackstone's senior managing director Neil Simpkins. Simpkins led Blackstone's acquisition of Apria and has been on Apria's board since Blackstone acquired the company in 2008. In September 2018, just months after Apria paid a $75 million dividend in June 2018, and during the period Apria was accused of defrauding Medicare, Simpkins bought a $37 million townhouse in Greenwich Village. Simpkins also led Blackstone's 2004 acquisition of Vanguard Health Systems, which in 2015 settled False Claims Act allegations with the U.S. Department of Justice. The complaint against Vanguard alleged that the company inflated patient bills, billed for services not provided, performed unnecessary tests to fraudulently increasing billing, and altered certain data to also fraudulently increase billing. Blackstone sold Vanguard Health Systems to Tenet Healthcare in 2013, but the False Claims Act allegations related to actions taken in 2012 while Blackstone owned the company. Simpkins also led Blackstone's 2017 acquisition of Team Health, a physician practice platform. In 2017 also settled with the DOJ related to Medicare fraud allegations. In 2019, Team Health helped fund a $53.8 million dark money campaign to block federal legislation cracking down on surprise medical billing practices in which patients are unexpectedly hit with exorbitant charges, often following visits to emergency rooms.